Hi viewers, my name is Tony Carnes and welcome to A Journey Through NYC Religions. I moved to West Harlem back in the day of the crack cocaine, murder, and mayhem epidemics. But I was really blessed to find God there on 153rd Street. I was enveloped with love. There was a Russian Orthodox church on my left, and on the right there was a Catholic elementary school and a Catholic church, and on the corner an African AME church, and around the corner two rocking Hispanic Pentecostal churches. The psalm from the Bible that I thought about in those days was Psalm 139, which says that God is everywhere. He lives on our street. He lives right at our stoop. The psalmist wrote, God knows when I sit down and when I rise up. Now, in every age, people have drawn on the Psalms to postmark God into their lives. Today, we really have the great pleasure to have David Van Biema, a journalist from Time magazine, who launched a book career on writing on religion. Most recently, he's written on Mother Teresa at 100 and has published a devotional called The Prayer Wheel. Today, we're going to get a sort of an inside peek on his upcoming book on the cultural history of the Psalms. David, welcome to our show.
Tony, thank you very much. Great to be here.
You make a point that the history of the Psalms is sort of a history of people making claims on them for their uses in different periods, different reasons. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Psalms are really unusual in the Bible, and they're unusual in ancient literature as well, in terms of being the humanity talking to God in a very intimate way. They're kind of notes back to management. You don't see that much. And because of that special thing that they do, partly, and also because they're beautiful and also because they are faith-filled, they have been beloved by many religious groups in order. However, each religious group has sort of turned them slightly in order to be able to make use of them, has, as you say, sort of laid claim on them for themselves. And to watch that happening is kind of to watch Western religion happen.
Now, you're making sort of a claim yourself on the Psalms with this book. How did you come to the Psalms this time around?
I came to the Psalms after 9/11. I was aware of some of the Psalms. I had read a bunch of the Psalms, but after 9/11, people started quoting Psalm 46 a lot because it seemed to be apropos of that really difficult, strained situation.
So like being in the furnace. I wonder if you could read us a little bit from Psalm 146, a couple of verses to give a sense of what you were experiencing, what people were talking about when after 9/11.
Sure. So this is the beginning of 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. Though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. Selah. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. And so if you were in the city and you felt that you were under fire and nobody knew what was going on, when somebody read those words about God being in the city, even if you didn't really believe in God, you felt as though somebody was talking to your situation and was giving you comfort and was suggesting that the city would prevail. At least that was the way that I heard it at that time. And I became very interested in the Psalms because if they could talk to me like that, then who else could they talk to and how could they talk to them?
That's right. Did you grow up religious yourself?
No, I grew up in a non-religious family.
Did your family have any history of paying attention to the Psalms?
Well, my family, as I discovered very late in the game, my grandfather were Jews, and my grandfather kept a Bible, like a 10-pound Bible. This thing, weighed more than this table, which he had notated, which was really odd considering that he wasn't religious. But he felt that the Bible was an important cultural document, and he felt that the Jewish involvement in the Bible was very important for people to know about. So I discovered that he had, given his own take on any number of verses. It was great.
That was so important to the older generations in Europe because it was also like laying a hold of Western civilization, the Western cultural tradition. I remember the chair of my seminar at Columbia. He was a rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
Came from Orthodox, became super Reform. I don't know, even less than Reform, but he always had this interest in saying, I represent what the Nazis repudiated, what they betrayed. That is, I represent the culture that really gives humanity, really gives some feeling for people. So he felt like keeping up with the Psalms, keeping up with and read them, even though he might not really relate to them as a deep believer, was important for his own sense of well-being and his hope for the future. I'm wondering if, the Psalms, this idea of coming to the Psalms and then, saying, where did they come from, and does it relate to the gods? Or the early Psalms, some of the language goes way back to sort of Canaanite polytheism.
Right.
And then the Hebrews sort of brought them in and polished them up and to dedicate to God. I remember we see this maybe in Psalm 82, where we have we sort of see all of these elements sort of come into this early period of the Psalm. Maybe you could read a little bit of that Psalm for us so that our audience can sort of hear this resonance of this older tradition from the Canaanite religion coming into a new context that is the religion of Israel.
I'd be happy to. I mean, the way I sometimes put it is that the religion that you find in the Psalms is not always totally a monotheistic religion. It's a monotheizing religion. It's in the process of getting there, which makes for difficulties for people who are monotheists and read it later. But in any case, so 82, God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. How long will ye judge unjustly and accept the persons of the wicked? Selah. Defend the poor and the fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and the needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Rid them out of the hand of the wicked. They know not, neither will they understand. They walk in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. But ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all nations. This is an amazing, when viewed from the point of view of monotheizing, this is a remarkable psalm because it's like you've been invited into the clubhouse when, the head of the club basically says, okay, none of you guys can be members anymore. You all have to leave. The reason that you all have to leave is because you did not do justice. It's also, there's a lot of, in the Psalms in general, and in particular in this psalm, there's a lot of language about creation. And creation is steady, but it becomes unsteady when justice is not done. And basically the God, the high God, the God who became the God of the Jews, is telling these other gods who are sort of in inferior positions but nonetheless divine, that because of the injustice that they allow, that they can no longer be gods, and essentially he is going to be it.
So in some ways this is like a door shutting. I'm not going to take it anymore. We're treating people badly. Let's not do it anymore.
Yeah, and it's one of the most important door shuttings in Western history. I mean, because this was a door shutting that from that point on that people went with and believed in. So it's for whatever reason, this psalmist chose to take us deep into this moment. It's kind of an incredible little drama, a way of showing that we're putting multiple gods behind us, and we only have the one.
And then we have that moment coming a little bit much later in the New Testament time, where Jesus used the Psalms and the apostles, Peter and Paul, used the Psalms. In fact, their familiarity with them seemed very great, and they used them quite a bit. What were they doing in using the Psalms at that time to talk to their audiences?
Well, they deeply needed to establish the authenticity of what they were doing. They had this amazing new idea of a Messiah who was killed and who rose again.
So this is back in the Canaanite days. There was sort of a door shutting, and this one is the Psalms were purpose for a door open.
This was a group of people who wanted to open another door, and they looked back to the Psalms as a way of establishing their viability, because old things were always better, And the Psalms were known by everybody, and if you could put the Psalms in your frame, then you could begin to move the frame your way.
But it also seems that, it seems certainly part of it, but it also seems something more than that, because when Jesus is on the cross, he mentions Psalm 22 and the utter about
The first lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that go?
My God, why have you forsaken me?
I mean, that's got to come from not just I'm trying to open the door and frame it. It comes from some sort of heartfelt condition.
Yes, well, I was talking about it as a text being written by people who are intentionally trying to do something, which is a kind of one way to look at Scripture. But you can also look at Scripture as being things that happened. And if a Jew, which Jesus was, were to die under those circumstances, this is something that he might very well say from the depths of his heart.
And his last words were from the Psalms. I believe that was Psalm 31, verse 5. How does you remember how that goes? That he says, right there, right on the cross, he says, "Into your hands
I commend myself." Right. Commend my spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's
now that's interesting, because that is not as, I mean, Psalm 22 is really sort of grounded in a sort of a despairing place that becomes a better place.
Yeah.
Into your hands I commend my spirit. It could really show up almost anywhere in the psalm. So in a way, it's almost an opportunistic use. This would fit here and has great meaning when Jesus speaks it under this circumstance. That in some ways it kind of elevates the psalm to the verse to a new place,
into a whole new religious context, a new age.
Yeah, sort of dead center.
Right. Well, that reminds me that that sort of the role of the Psalms in Western history is that they sometimes they're at the center, sometimes they're at the periphery. At this time, a couple hundred years after Christ, we get the Muslims come onto the scene, and they used the Psalms at first, right?
Well, they didn't use them as they were certainly not the Quran, but they respected them. And the reason that David is one of the 12 great prophets of Islam is because he had written the Psalms. But the interesting thing is that the first Muslims didn't know all of the Psalms. They had been exposed to some of them, and they respected them.
They liked them for what reason?
They like them because I mean, first of all, because they're human, and secondly, I think because the Psalms that they were familiar with were monotheistic. That is, not monotheizing, monotheistic, and Islam was a great monotheistic. It was in some ways one of the most strictly monotheistic of all the Western faiths. So they were very excited about that, and they liked the Psalms for that reason. However,
that means monotheistic is. It means that there's only one God. There's not any other spirits or gods that can even come close.
Yeah, they say God is not partnered, is the way it's said. God is not partnered. That's their issue with Christianity, is that God seems a little bit too spread out over different persons for them.
But they eventually sort of stopped using or relating to the Psalms very much.
What happened was the next time that they really ran into the Psalms, their situation had changed, and also then they became familiar with all the Psalms. First of all, they were fighting against Christians, and the way that they ran into the Psalter was that this was a book that was that their enemies loved. So it's coming to you from the wrong place to begin with. And the second thing was that if you read all 150 Psalms, or if you even were to just read Psalm 82, you'll see that it was monotheizing and not totally monotheistic at that point. And Islam is such that there really isn't much room for that attitude. So it's not like they read David out of the roster of prophets, but they stopped really dealing with the Psalms.
Now, what happens also is that in the Middle Ages, the medieval ages, the Psalm starts to assume a different role in religious life. And it's a role that has repercussions or echoes into some of the things that are going on today in religion here in New York. Tell me a little bit about this change in the Middle Ages use of the Psalms.
Well, if I understand you right, I mean, one of the things that happened during the Middle Ages was that the Psalms moved from being the concentrated focus of attention from a very small but very devout group of people, which would be the monks in the monasteries, into the population at large. And Europe during the Middle Ages became the first place where almost everybody could be expected perhaps since the Jewish temple, where almost everybody could be expected to know a psalm or a set of psalms, where they had truly integrated themselves into the common life and were an immensely important part of the shared understanding, sometimes, in fact, more so than the Gospels. People might be more likely to know a psalm than they would much of the Gospels.
The Middle Ages, the medieval period was a time where there was lots of sort of religious innovations, ranging from the architectural innovations of the cathedrals to the idea of pilgrimages and doing penance and things like this. Did they read the Psalms when they went on pilgrimages or sing them?
Yes. I mean, and this is the way that people make use of these poems and these prayers. Sometimes in the way that they were originally made use of, and sometimes in their own way. In the case of the pilgrims, it's probably very much the same way. The pilgrims in the Middle Ages who were going to these sites with these relics in them probably use the Psalms or some of the Psalms in much the same way as the Jewish pilgrims had during the big festivals, because during the festivals everybody had to go to Jerusalem. And some of these psalms seem to have been intended originally as psalms that might be sung by a pilgrim. Well, you can take those psalms as a pilgrim going to St. James of Compostela, and you can sing that psalm, and it becomes yours. Penitential psalms is really fascinating because if you look at the Psalter as a whole, it's not a very penitential book. There's plenty of penitence in the Jewish Bible.
What does penitential and penitence mean?
Penitence means that I admit my sins, I repent my sins, and it is my hope that my sins will be forgiven.
Sort of like they're sort of, you're purified. You get that relief from being burdened.
Yeah, the notion is that you're redeemed. I mean, these words like redeemed take on a fascinating new definition in a Christian context, but people understood. The Christians during the Middle Ages said, well, penitence and sin and penance are very, very important to us, and they found one psalm which is a beautiful penitential psalm, and then they found 6 other psalms that had penitential bits in them, and they pulled them all together into what are known as the 7 penitential psalms, and these psalms became some of the most important psalms throughout the entire Middle Ages.
What was one of them, Psalm 51?
Yes, the one that I was talking about that really sort of is from the get-go a penitential psalm is Psalm 51.
No, the thing about 51 and what it does for you, what this idea that God redeems you. You may be, no matter what bad situation you may be in, how you feel bad about yourself, how you treated people, there's some place where you can go and sort of get all that washed away, get that relief. I mean, it's no matter how down you're out and how many people are blaming you for doing things, which you probably did, or maybe did, that God is going to, some way, when you come to His center, the church, that there's going to be a process by which, you know what, you're accepted. You can have a new start. And 51 is one of those that people all the way from the Middle Ages up to the gospel hymns like to key off of. That wow, I was lost, but now I'm saved. Felt terrible about myself, and I was in darkness, and now I feel like. Can you read a little bit about that for us? Because it's really very powerful, and it still resonates through music today.
Sure, and a phrase that you might want to keep in your mind while I'm doing this, which is not in the psalm, but very much kind of this kind of psalm, is to be washed in the blood of the Lamb.
Yes.
The purifying notion. So here is, long before that language really got going, Psalm 51. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness. Unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee, thee only, have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest. And then later on in the psalm, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with thy free spirit. Then will I teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners shall be converted unto thee. So as part of this confession that he is making to God, and as part of the hope that he will be forgiven, he is saying, and then I'm going to go preach about you to other people who might be transgressing.
Now, let me focus on that little phrase very early on, tender mercies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's such a wonderful use of a phrase. Mm-hmm. Tender gives feeling exactly what mercy is. Do you know if Robert Duvall, his movie, is that the same feeling? Are you familiar with Robert Duvall's movie, Tender Mercies?
It's been a long time since I've seen it. I think that I actually believe that that the scriptural aspect was not just a throwaway.
Well, what he was he was a guy that was very sinful himself, and he sort of doesn't have any friends left, and he flees to this little town, mm-hmm. and the people of that church take him in and love him, uh-huh. and they gave him tender mercies, uh-huh. Uh-huh. And all of a sudden he starts healing. I mean, all the bruise of life, he starts feeling, well, I'm sort of renewed. And yet it wasn't the normal way of saying, you're going to be on the big stage and be a great country western singer or stuff. It was just that, we want you to sing in our choir. We want you to read Psalm, 51 as the portion of the day. And all of that came by and started touching him so way. Psalms also deal with, as you know that they deal with some of the harsh stuff of life. That if when you feel rageful yourself, not that tender mercies is when your rage is gone and you're spin up. But before you get that, you have a lot of rage. This is sort of right now an age of rage. On one side against Obama, then on the other side against Trump, and it's just like people want to let that out. Is there a psalm where people can sort of read that and get all of that rage out of them?
Well, I'm going to talk about a psalm that really, unfortunately, could be seen as more of a symptom of this than a cure for this. There are psalms that say, 73 says, I've been a beast to you. He's talking to God. But I mean, it suggests that somebody has somehow been animalistic and would not like to be that anymore. And therefore, perhaps that the kind of rage that we sometimes feel is not something that we can really bring to God. But Psalm 109 and several other psalms, but Psalm 109 is kind of the one to end all psalms of this sort, is just a series of curses, one after the other. It talks about wanting your enemy to just be a blot on the road. It talks about wanting your enemy's children to be beggars. I mean, it's just bam, 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 bam. And when you talk about the Psalms and you talk about the power of them, you also have to talk about the power of them in this way. Without anybody's really, I think, prompting somebody to do this during the Obama administration, somebody had the bright idea of saying, I found a prayer that I can pray for Obama. It's Psalm 109. And then just to show you that it works both ways is with the election of Trump, somebody on the other side said, oh yeah, I found a psalm I can pray for Trump, Psalm 109. So it's a terrible way to talk about the nowness of the Psalms, but it is part of what they are, and it's part of the way that they speak in our human voice, and it's not totally surprising that they should be used now in this way.
They really capture sometimes the ages of rage that people don't know what to do with, or they maybe know too well what to do with, and they want to put them out, and the Psalms really captures that reality.
Although it's really important to know that another psalm begins, "It is good when brothers live in peace together." That's right. So you have to have they got it all going.
Yeah, some peace there. In the Middle Ages, I remember there was today we have a lot of conflict over journalism, and then there's all these copyright suits and stuff. In the Middle Ages, I remember you telling me that there was sort of a early pre-copyright dispute that was settled by an angel.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that this really speaks to the ultimate of how important the Psalms seemed to people in the Middle Ages, and specifically in Ireland in the 7th century, which is really quite early. There's a story that's attached to one of the earliest Irish saints, Saint Columba, who's also known as Columcilla. And Columba noticed that another saint that he knew had gotten hold of the latest translation of the Psalms. So he asked the other saint, he said, "Can I borrow that?" And the guy said, "Sure." And he held on to it, and he held on to it, and he held on to it. And eventually the other saint sent a boy around to find out what was going on with this new translation of the Psalms. And so the boy peered through St. Columba's keyhole, and he saw that he was copying everything, he was copying the entire Psalter, and he was in a room that was lit only by the light of his fingers. There's a very miraculous aspect to the whole thing. But he became aware that the boy was looking through the keyhole, and so he got his crane, his bird, everybody ought to have a crane, to reach his beak through the keyhole and pluck out the boy's eye. Now, needless to say, this ticked off the other saint, and he healed the boy. That really isn't what the story is about. But he brought St. Columba up before the High King of Ireland, and he said he should not have been doing that. He said the calf of my cow is my calf. Therefore, what he was basically saying is, you can't make a copy and then take ownership of it, because if the Psalms are mine, if this copy of the Psalms is mine, then so is any copy, and you are not doing that legitimately. And essentially Columbus said, information wants to be free, saying this is really important stuff, we need this. The High King ruled in favor of the other guy, not in favor of Columba. Columba started a war over it. The two saints were with their forces, kind of praying. They had their arms outstretched in prayer, and Columba actually won that battle, which, just so I don't lose the punchline, which some people have sometimes said was the first copyright suit.
Yeah.
But as a result of it, an angel came to him and exiled him from Ireland. And Columba turned out to be one of the first great missionary monks who started some of the greatest monasteries in Scotland.
Well, there's so many stories from the Psalms, as you can say. I'd like this to end with Psalm 139, that no matter where we are, that God can be there. And I remember that Psalm sustained me, and hopefully it will sustain the audience for the future. Thank you.